Setting track visions, location of cycle lines, high position location lines, op centers, anything calculation set interference is position location and conversion. The track to its communication setting is all levels of open sequence, open panels, open communication lines, calculation line settings. It's all directs to the locations how to communicate with your moon. Now, your moon is an essentially calculation line string. Spacing lines are now as a 48 graphing spring line connection setting. That puts position locations into 3 zeros of calculations. That opens all signals and modifications, puts in 48,000 lines. The calculation of the defaults, each channel communication setting has all levels of communication, all right? So this obsoletes the system location of channels, puts in position original programming, inline rotation, center interaction, putting all communication lines in the computer program setting and position locations back to 0. Each lines indicate position of programs, location, setting, attractions, puts lacing lines of communications and pixel streams back in division. Okay, now the track to its communication line interference have to really understand how to put the moon where it needs to be in position locations. Your clock line centers to your body frames inside location of higher self, and your avatar is set position your sim and navigation lines, calculation stream location is line settings of 012, 024. Okay. Your track to its communication line interference is coming into 48 line settings of 72 tracks in position location number 44. The center of its communication of the moon has to go back into 0 of operation on a 24 cycle. Line conditions of 7 waving cycles and high position of travel calculations are bodies of water. Track needs communication setting into your 12 graph calculation setting to your rainbow graph interference in position of travels. Very, very complicated stuff in applications. Okay. So mechanism high position over power, over charge, over calculation over pi, directing lines of communication setting to all calculations, setting lines of circuits, position of programs, circuitry line calculation and travel communication of programs, directing line communication lines of lacing lines and division. Your pixel streams and position location is coming back in its original templates of design of templates. Templates communication line interference comes into frame communication setting to your receptor line calculations, putting track lines and high center interference in position locations back to 0. So every time you come in a 24 cycle line communication setting, your moon is going to go back in time position travel calculation lines to its error. That correlates in high position to your oversoul in track locations, your founders, builders, and pioneers back in traction. Okay, that's what's happening right now. Okay, with the center communication of the team line, they're working with 2 million line settings. Okay. Per frame per calculation, over charge, over pi. And their direct location system is also 7 cycles communication line interference, but it's in a 12 line setting provision in set location line calculation setting and travel communications. This puts in modification line setting to high position track calculating high line rotation center interference in 144 DNA track line conditions of programs. Direct line calculation of phase correction clocking is high calculating line streams and adherence location positions as 012, in line calculation 024, 048, 072, and 0144. Applied to those locations are 1044 and a base in track locations, how to use their analog, digital log, Fibonacci log, and position locations to their time capacitor log set locations. The self-generation line screens and the high position of its operation of the moonline rotation center is going to be in a high position of travel calculations, putting 4 waving cycles, travel communication settings, northwest, south, and east of hemispheres, and track location of 1 cycle division, putting all calculations alpha, omega, micro, and macro in 1 center of operation. Okay. Taken out of the hemi-syncing position location, new grounds, new operation surface. Travel calculation, high positions operation. Okay. So that's what happened in species, and that's what's happening with set location line streams and high calculation settings, all position locations to the rebellion. Okay. Recognizing platforms is really understanding all positions of programs. Now you really have to watch this live, because it's going to blow you away. Direction timelines and sequence of panels, it's all levels of track locations, all right? Serving track lines into your moon. There's your moon, right? Service communication lines, set location track lines. 012 calculations, right? Top line signals, right? Space lines, timelines, anomaly, okay, travel locations. Y-line factors and position of travel calculations. Point systems, travel calculation lines of pi, direct signals, modification line screens, high positions operation. Okay, so what we do is we take the 012 and track lines and 0 line position of 1 and position of 2 and position of 0. So that puts 1 line meter and 2 track location of 0 operation. Takes lines of 2 and track lines of 1 in position of 0 in correlation setting, putting backline communications. All calculations at 120 and notifications at 210. Track lines calculation line interference. We change the 0 operation setting, 0 calculations, 0 2-line positions of 1. So in position of 120, 210, and 021. Track location high setting. Operation line interference. We change position location of 1, lines of 0, and position of 2 in set location setting attractions. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines of pi, direct location of 5, 5 lines of 7, and track location setting and travel. Direct lines of modification line interference. We set position location high center interference and travel communication setting. So 13 lines of 14, 14 lines of 15, 15 lines of 16, 16 lines of 17, 18, 19, and 20. 20 lines of high calculations of 24. Track line calculating line centers, high position location of 0, 24 of action, and set position of travel. Direct and communication line interference, solar graph calculation lines of center and communication setting position of its operation. Direct line calculation high interference and modification line screens, high position of its operation surface and ground lines and crop circles in set position. Direct communication line interference, magnetic highway information travel calculations of the moon and track locations going back in time. Travel direction of time sequence, panels, position location, high centers, travel line center interference, waving communication, code waving line centers, and track communication setting, cosmic universal line screens, high position of its operation. Done by equation. Very complicated stuff, guys, the clocking. All right. So the mechanism of high force is pi direction of time sequence. We take the 0 line calculation of 24. 24 platitudes line center line interference, sets platforms of communications and 2 lines of tracks. See? Sets position locations, opens up a high calculation lines, crosses line stream, and a new open signal, open communication panel in position of travel calculation lines and space anomaly. Sets lines of communications. 3 lines of communications, 4 lines of track, 5 lines of revision. Okay, center calculation line interference. Sun comes in, moon lines, tracks, center line, and rotation centers, puts an upline signal, obsolete position programs in rotation centers, goes around the full clocking system of travel calculation lines of the moon in center line communication setting to a new program system to its location system of adaptation. Done by equation. Look really close, you can see the intelligence. There's the eye line center, rotation center, position, body frame, position, location, solar graph. Done by equation. All right. How are we all doing in set locations? Hemdall, communications, lines, high center interference, all those Ziggy communications, setting and travel. All right. So that's clocking system line calculation of the moon lines. Each one has a fragmentation stream, direct line condition, all levels of defrag, fragmentation stream interference, autolog communication setting, program line, rotation center, track location system, 024 line interference, 048, 072, and 0144, track location line illumination graph calculation setting, adaptation surface, a center communication. All right, so that's done. Now that's just center calculation line stream. Seconds, locations of pi, 3 minutes over hours. Direct calculation line interference. We take 7 lines of track of 2, right? Can't see the conversions, right? I'm going to show you because it disappears. You see it? So location. So there's that location line settings, travel calculation. All right, so the 2 track lines comes in 2 line settings. 2, 2, 2, 3 lines of panels. So you add 3 lines of platforms and set locations, right? Direct and communication line screens sets position to its operation surface and position location of capsules on set location. Now, directly modification lines, we take the point system to 2 track locations, right? This modifies the high calculating lines of zeros. Track line calculated setting, 024 sets lines of ground lines, operation surface. We take the 0 lines of 2 lines of 4 lines and track location high settings, right line, track line, high center interference, and port of communication setting and traction. Now, direct signal line conditional levels, we take the 0, we take the 2, we take the 4 on the left line cycle. Driving calculation line centers, high position of metric meters, and set position location lines of space. Space track line calculation center lines. Operation server location system and center position. Okay. Now, direct signals, we go through the waving line cycles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24. Waving line screens, set position operation. Solar sail in opposite directions. 3 lines of panels, 3-point systems, and travel calculating line centers of 0 operation. That my question. All right. Going through the calculation over line screen, Moon lines that rotate the surface. Triangulates high position of programs. Point systems calculations. Box lines are 8 lines. Sets position of 3 tracks. Okay? So 3 tracks comes in line calculation setting. 3 lines at center and 3 lines in set location. Space lines and time lines. Sets position of splits, anomalies, track location line system. And pyramid string location of center at travel calculating line centers of film projection. Now, directing lines of signals, 333 modifies the system location of travel lines. 333 sets line calculation lines. So we had 6 lines of traction, 6 lines of position, and 0 of operation. 606. 6 lines of communication, 6 line divisions, and 0 operation communication as center calculation line centers at open sequence of pattern communication. Now, directing lines of modification line centers, pyramid comes in rotation centers and track locations. High channels, framing lines, and rotation surface and traction. Okay? Direct line communications comes in position, right, to Mother Earth and track location, right? Ground lines calculates high positions, right? So half lines of the wall, direct lines of the ether, and position programs. Half lines is communications, right? Frames, lines, divisions, triangulation, reset, position programs. Calculating high centers, all line rotation center, and position location system into Merkaba, tesseract, and cloud lines, streams lines, and high position. Direct lines of communication line screens. Vortex calculation line centers. So we're going to use a 70,000 track line calculating line interference and a vortice interference location of orbiting. Track lines calculation of probing. Direct line calculating setting, position of travels. Direct line communication setting, position location system. Traffic calculation line position modification. Center calculation line interference to travel. That's my equation. All right, so in that line center high position of its operation surface, it's going to get very complicated. Moon track lines calculation line interference. Bracket communication line center, 0 position of 24. Sets travel calculation, 0, 12 line center high positions. So weightiness line interference, line position location 19, line center location of 39 tracks. 39 track location equal lines in 1969, line centers high position location system. Track calculation line centers of 2024, set position operation. So we take the 2 track line center, 0 operation line interference, and 2 track line calculation setting, position of 4. Sets position back force calculation line interference and change position location in all settings into 2024. Sets position of past, present, and future in position of future line calculation setting. Formulates calculation lines in metric meters, position over power. Direct line calculation dimension line scales. Sets position of bounce into vector. Calculation of velocity and volume and set location of travel position operation. Done by equation. Okay. So the metric meter line stream line, the center position location of its operation surface is triangulating reposition of program lines, guys. It's redirecting communication setting to its operation surface and set locations. So you have to understand how to use the calculation of the lines of numbers inside through a cyclone. Cyclone line connection of a closest communication line to the dimensional line scale, sets positions back and balance and travel communication setting. How it serves location system to travel calculate the line interference, high position of its operation location system to its moon and track location. That my equation, right? Setting through diamond properties. That's right, McCall. Very good. Properties of communication lines back in default channels. Communication line setting is 0.24. Now the tracking communication lines frame box lines. We have 4 box location settings: north, west, south, and east. Okay, north, west, south, east. Okay, setting calculation of 1 line centers, high position location, flux past position of channel. Now, directing communication line screens sets lines of operation, taking the hemisync line calculation line interference of north, west, south, and east in 1 center communication setting, equal line and position of travel, in direct signal line connection to all modification system and traffic calculation lines of point systems. Okay? Directing lines of communication lines, equal line communication line interference comes into your pyramid line stream location, Merkaba, tesseract, and your tetrahedron locations. Track to its communication setting, to its operation service and set location. Okay? So in calculations, point systems, the 3 tracks. Triangulation or reset position of diamond core and line rotation center attractions. Put in operation line centers, equal line communication setting, operation server location setting, and interference position of your flywheel and traction. That's my equation, right? Center communication lines. Team is now out of the hemisync line interference of north, west, south, and east, and direct location of 1 framing system, location of 1 cycle, calculation line interference, going in the same direct location system and traction. That's my equation. Congratulations, team. Now, in the line center line interference, we changed the 3 lines of communications out of the equation lines of 3 screens. Now, that directs signals to your system to its location centers. Travel calculated line interference comes at all position of travel calculated line settings, all levels of operation surface, and phase recognition of time sequence, all position of panels, and future adaptation. Down by equation. Okay? So you're all at the hemisinks now. All right, so you're in position locations. Now we take the alpha, omega. Box position triangulation and go calculation of triangulation, box, and line rotation, center, and travel. Directing lines, communication, setting high calculation, setting high positions, operations, zero location system, all adaptation locations, and high position location calculations. Point systems of 4 tracks. Point systems of 3 tracks. Point systems of 4 tracks. Point systems of 3 tracks. Sets the locations of all levels of polarities. Track calculation line interference, high position locations. High line center, high interference. Male positions, female. Positions of male, track location, high interference. Equal line position location, high calculation line interference. Earth and line rotation center. Calculation higher self. Calculation line interference. High position location of soul, direction to high sequence. Direct calculation line interference. And avatar sequence like communication setting. And sim and center communication. Down by equation. Okay. So we come into line calculation lines, metric meters and scales, balance position of 3 lines, center lines of the sun, and position location of the moon, and track location of high settings, all levels of operation. Okay. Direct lines of communication line settings, hemisinks over pi, direct line calculating setting, and center of operation. So we come into earth tones, communication line screens, calculation modification lines, unification line centers of a new phase direction of time sequence, all position location of all levels of transformer units, and set location of travel. Down by equation. Okay. All right. So that's done through equation line screens. That's operated through line rotation. Now, in position locations, guys, you have to really understand how to use the alpha line communications, wave and line cycles, travel communications. Okay. Abs lines, delta waves, travel communication line centers, center communications, right? And you got a theta box, line centers, high position travel calculation, high interference, but it's open through 4-point system, the travel calculation settings and traction. Okay. So we use the alpha line calculating line centers. Now, because of location high interference, we have 0 and we have 24 track locations back into 0 and back into 1 line rotation. Track calculation lines and dimensional lock line screens, 3 line rotation centers. Position location of past, present, and its future adaptation surface and set locations. Now, they allocate a line switch in high position location, tell lines of rotation center and interference, and position location of 4 lines of track location comes to the sun. Travels communication program setting high position its operation surface, triangulation reset position programs, and calculating line and positions all over the clocking and line rotation center and travel communication setting, a point system, and travel calculation. Done by equation. All right. So know exactly what's going on through all calculation line screens, guys. You really have to understand how to use your calculation lines, your alpha, your mega, micro, and macro. Point system, electrical box, point line centers, and data streams, data operation line interference. We got the alpha line rotations, delta communication streams, we got a theta interference, and we got heart direction of time sequence. Directing lines of communication, center lines of dimensional lines, lock line screens, high interference of telegraphing communication center, and center position of its operation. Directing line communication line centers, XT1000 comes in, center position operation, scans position location of 3 sets of position operation. Directs communication lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 21, 24 line interference. Down through equation. Okay. All right. So the center calculation lines of 2 platforms. It says position of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 line centers of traction. Direct calculation on sun comes in, position of calculation line interference, rotors and routers, line rotation center, position of communication setting. Now, direct line communication line centers, XT1000 comes out, position location of track lines on 2-point center. 2-point center line position location, high center interference, and pyramid activation stream location at the center. Direct communication line interference, high position travels. Direct line calculations, 2-track line hand interference. XT1000 travels out and 2-track locations. Back to the moon setting. Down through equation. Okay. So center communication is distributing valves. Direct calculation electrical line circuits, high position of programs. So we take the 10 lines of units, sets position of 4-track line connections, high centers, 4 over pi, directs lines of 1 line center and position of 0, 1, 1, 1, and track location of 4-track line connections, high centers, box and triangulation of box and set location. Down by equation. All right, Katie. So when we panel line stream, we get into, again, 4 graph panels and line rotation of 3-track line settings and high position. Now, direct communication line interference, we have 1, 2, 3, and position of 4 and track location of centers. XT1000 travel calculus lines of point system, 1-track, 2-track, 3-track, and 4-track line centers of high position is operation. Okay. Wall connectors, line interference, time streams, time center, time pi. Streams, lines of communication, sending the travel recognition of time sequence. I'm changing all panel communications now. Lacing lines, communication lines, graph line calculation, setting a code, weaving a travel. Done by equation. Okay, so mechanism high positions of pi, direct signals and position of travel. Direct calculation lines. We have an XT 100,000 line setting and position of its operation. Calculates line interference. Scans position of one line center of operation surface and triangulation reset positions of programs in set location. Done by equation. Metric meters, 4-line track lines, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sets position location energetic waves. Set location lines of 1, 2, 3 set location of travels. Add 1 line signatures of 4 lines, sets position of 8 centers of communication. Done by equation. All right, complicated stuff, guys. So I'm using the core line settings and travel communications, 20 line settings, sets position of track lines into 5, 6 position operation, into 11 calculations, into position location lines of 4 travels. So metric meter line interference of seconds, minutes, position location of 2-hour line centers of 2 operation surface, triangulation of point system to travel. Direct and line communication line interference, 4 over lines, equal lines of communications, metric meter line interference, panels communication line interference, moon track lines, travel direction of time sequence, position of panels of communication. Now, directing lines that calculate line interference, crosses line signals, high position. Position track lines, solar graph calculation lines, directing line set location system, sonar, communication, line interference, high position travel, done by equation. All right, so in that track locations, we high generation screens. Put in all position locations and high centers and all travel communications to its operation surface and track location. Okay. Center meters and travel calculations. More XT1000s come out and 2 tracks and 3 line rotation. Okay. Center communication line centers, high position locations. So where the growth things come in, earth line centers and travel. Travel communication line centers, high position locations. Pyramid activation string, point system, travel calculations, and line centers, high operation surface and track location. Done by equation. Okay. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay. So once we are in position of track lines, the connections to the moon opens all new cycles. Okay. Repositions of factors over calculations over pi. Direct calculation lines, out calculation line interference. Volume equals lines of pi. Sets line calculation. Velocity equals lines of pi. Direct calculation of 0 to 24 communication lines of pi. Calculation line centers of travel communications. Done by equation. All right. So the scale position of travel lines in your moon line rotation surface in track location. Now, in track location setting, you have to really understand how this works in all position of its program. 13 communication setting, track line interference, 5 line rotation center, position location 555, track location of bracket interference, into location line interference, high travel communications. That's 15 line settings, travel calculating lines, high center interference, 15 million line track location line centers, high position location of 3 zeros, and track communication setting operators like connect high interference, a box triangulate high interference, and triangulation box, position of travel. By equation. Okay. So everything is done through scale. Everything is done through balance. Now we go through the human resonance and travel calculation lines of point system and travel communications. Now direct lines of calculating line interference. 1 XT1000 high setting. Okay. 2 track lines high center interference. A 3 set position of programs. Direct communication lines, crosses line screens, crosses line screens, crosses line screens is at position of its operation. Done by equation. Okay. Sets like calculation line streams and high position of center line position. Okay. Direct lines of communication comes into a dome center. Travel position location of its operation surface. Okay. Directing lines of platforms, crossing lines of 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8 line centers and travel calculations, high position of point systems. Direct calculation line interference, sets lines of communications. Notice we bring in the green. Green comes in line calculation setting, metric screens, metric positions, metric travels, line condition of Tron, and line rotation center, and position of its operation surface and travel calculations. Done by equation. Okay, number sequence patterns, travel of time sequence. Now we come into all dimensional dot screens, 3 lines rotation centers, travel direction of timelines, point system calculation high centers, green line centers, dots position travel calculation centers, and point system calculation line interference, alpha tone, delta line communication, waving line cycles, position of programs, directing communication lines of point system, travel calculation lines, heat standard patterns to high calculation setting, indirect locations, back and 0 calculation. Okay, done by equation. All right, so we set up line calculation lines as security lines, panel communication lines, 2 tracks, 2 tracks. Sets lines of 2 lines, sets position of 2. You got to know where the 2s go. Set in position of 2 tracks, 2 line settings, 2 track communications, 2 interference. 2 provocations, 2 line generations, 2 height calculations, 2 operation surface. Now, directing lines of communication of 2 lines, sets position of traffic calculation lines, points this line back and line rotations of black line rotation centers. Traffic calculation line centers the center of communication. That's like a crossword puzzle. Track location line centers. Travel lines of 2 line rotations, 2 line interference, 2 position of traffic communication, 2 lines calculations, 2 line centers, height calculations 0, 0 line rotation center, 2 track interference, 2 position of program settings, high position of its operation. Done by equation. Okay? All right, so center calculation line interference, set position of tone, change position of traffic calculations, 0 communication setting at all levels of operation. Now, direct state locations of panels, sets of another dome center communication, traffic calculation line centers into scales, position of balance, and the line center interference and position of travel. Direct calculation line interference, high position location, 1 exceed 1,000 comes on plateau. Direct lines of communication setting, 2 tracks, 2 lines, 2 communication, 2 interference, 2 position programs, 2 line calculation, 2 line centers, moon line rotation, center line rotation, center calculations, center position operation, server location and setting. Done by equation. Okay, so taking out the energetic graph line screens, high position geometric operation, server location, setting, position of its operation is kind of like paint by number. Now we use the cloud line settings, traffic calculations 1 position, line center location at 3 positions. Sets line calculation non interference at 13 line communication. Sets lines at 0 lines at 2 lines at 4 line rotation center of travel. Sets calculation high interference. So we got 4 track line connection at 5 position of box centers of travel. Directing line calculates lines, 1 signal, 1 line rotation, 8 line position of travel. So that's 1 position travel, 8 line center interference, and position location 6. 6 lines of 7, 7 lines of 8, lines of 9, and line position of 12, and set position locations. Sets calculation line interference into 0 line communications at 144, track location line settings of travel. Done by equation. Okay. So once you understand how to set up the scales of balance, the travel direction of time sequence really gets you in position of travel communications. The operation line center location is the center calculation lines of flywheel shift time sequence. Puts position line connections, platforms of 2 and platforms of 2 track location. Now, in position location, the sun comes in, but only stays in 1 center of communication. All right. Now, indirect signal comes in lines out of the equation. Okay. Center position of its own pie of calculations. Right. 3 centers splitting the anomalies in 3 tracks. Directing lines of communication, the platform goes into the opposite direction line centers in a 4-track location. Okay. Now, in that direction, the sun comes into the opposite system, into the oscillation program, in communication center of communication system, of future adaptation of high calculation. Okay? Mega, multi-pass. Okay? The future adaptation is set up. Okay? Now, getting in position location of centers is really to understand how to use your fly direction timelines. Direct line communication, your moon. Moon is here in track locations, right? Direct lines of communication lines is all levels of the jump scar setting. Now, travel calculating lines crosses lines centers of panel communications, right? This is a moon track lines to new solar graph, new solar division, new solar panel, and position location of a sail or track location. Done by equation. Future adaptation line centers, center communication line interference, in position location, your Merkaba, your tetrarine, your pyramid line rotation, center calculation lines, a voice direction of time sequence, of vibration of time lines, calculation of the moon line, and interference of half pipe communication setting, scales, position of travel calculating the line centers, in position of its operation. Done by equation. Okay, so how's everybody doing so far? Very powerful, right? So it's great to see everybody. It's amazing what we're coming into, all track location of future adaptation, face recognition. Okay. Okay, so that's done through equation. Direct line signals and plateau. Now the position of travel calculated in the line centers, you have to truly understand how to surface its position location of center. The center communication line interference is all levels of track location. So yes, McCall, you're gonna have to watch this again and again and again and again because it's very complicated. It's very complicated. This is understanding what is happening with your moon, why it's going back in time. Your center calculation line centers to all waving cycles, all position of its fragmentation stream location system is coming in defrag of fragmentation line calculating the line setting. It's retracking its division, defaults position to its original templates of its own design. The track is calculating high interference in position location as 0.24 in line calculation setting equals lines of 0 in calculation, right? So that's a 24-line graph in position of 144 months of space in travel calculation of streams, done by equation. So yes, drink your water. Okay, so truly understand the power erection of time sequence all through face recognition. All right? Know exactly what your moon is doing, okay, to get ready. So its surface is in all position, location, line settings, guys. It travels so fast in position line conditions. So once you get out of the 48, you come to the 72, which is the computer frame line. It's a relay program, directing lines that compute the line in rotation, center position to its operation, location, setting, height, position to its calculation. Now, a direct signal and position to its locations is understanding your 24, your 48, your 72, and your 144 in position of 2 panels of calculations, right? 3 track line settings, 3 lines of communication, 3 lines of interference, 3 position programs, and 3 location centers. Sets track lines at 3, 3, 3, 3, and 4 set location. Okay? Sets lines of 4 equals lines of 5. Sets position of 2. Sets lines of 7 a track location. Okay? All right. So in metric meters, the positions of power is over a generator. Generator communication lines of particle line interference and positional lacing lines of communication of 2 tracks. Calculation lines of the moon in position of 2 track lines and 3-line rotation center and track locations. What your moon is doing is reshaping its anomalies back into the original design. Okay. Now, in that design line interference, a set position of its operation surface, the moon and the sun work together in calculation. Directing lines of communication line settings, crossing line symbols, all lines of high calculating line rotation center and communication. Okay. Directing lines of panels and direct signals. Now, the position of planetary line centers comes into Jupiter, comes into Neptune, comes into Mercury, and comes into Pluto in set position of 4 track locations. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Now, understand the 4 lines of metric meters and position locations to your calculation line setting. Now, if you look really close, you can actually see the solar sail that it's creating through its own anomaly. Okay? Track its correlation line centers of 0 communication setting in track location system and time zone such calculation. Done by equation. Very powerful on what your moon is doing through your frequency panels of set location. Okay? All right, so we use the 4 generation screens, alpha, omega, micro, and macro. Now your hemisinks are now in 1-line cycle. Setting track lines and communication setting to 1-line rotation surface sets 1 lines of grounds in set position. 2 operation lines, 3 track line conditions of 4 measured. Okay, 4 calculation line centers, 4 lines of 5, 5 lines of 7 set location. So we take the 4 lines at high calculation, 2 lines at track, 3 lines of revision, and 4 lines at high position. Okay, so that's 4,234 line rotation centers and second per line calculation setting and point system and travel calculation lines of your moon that surface in its position travel communicate setting of future adaptation of 0 of calculation. That my equation. All right, so it's all levels of numbers, number sequence location system. Now it's really understanding how to understand what the moon is doing in surface, how fast it travels is through acceleration, vast, volume, and velocity. Okay, so get in the position of vast, volumes at velocity setting. Travel calculation of the sun and the moon protects the system location in the 1-line center of attraction. Direct lines of vast, volume, and velocity in 3 tracks in calculations. So we change the atom lines into molecular structures and 3 set location line centers, the 3-point systems, and the 4-track line connections, all measure in track location, high calculating lines of center in position to calculation. Done by equation. All right. Complicated, isn't it? Try to understand what this all means in all calculation setting attractions. Okay? All right. But it's very powerful what you guys are coming into. Okay? Okay, so this is exactly what's going on with your moon surface. Your moon line center's high position of track calculated line interference has to come into 0 in position of 144 in track locations, blocking. Okay? Mechanism line centers of 0 operation, 1 grounds, and 2 4-generation screen lines of high calculation. Now, this puts position of the sun and the moon in track location. Oh, it's a calculation. Now, in that direct line interference, we take the 0 the ground lines, flywheel direction, time sequence, 2 zeros of operation, and center communication. Now, direct lines of 1, signal lines of 4, 4 track lines, 4 generation interference, solar graph calculation, stream lines, and high text, high centers, and high travel communication setting, a program communication setting, a future adaptation. That my question. Okay. So we all understand how to use the foundation graph lines. It directs your signals and modification centered in track lines. So we take the 2 lines of panels, 2 1 line centered high interference, sets 2 panels communications. So it's 2 on tracks and 2 on provision, right? Sets line calculation line interference. So we take the 1 line centers and 2 track locations. 1 line provision of 12. Sets line calculation setting. 1 line conditions of 12. Sets line communication of setting. 3 track line centers high operation. That's where you come into 12, 12 and set locations, right? Standard calculation line time sequence. 12 lines of measure and data line rotation center travel, okay? Set position location of 12 lines as clocking line rotation centers and communication interference and travel communication setting, open signals and high position to its moon and operation. All right, so we got 2-dimensional sails, crossing line screens, right? Sets position new operation surface and triangulation reset position of programs and calculation of compute system and travel. Now, direct communication lines, platforms in position of 2, in position of 2 in track locations. That's how we come into 2 tracks and 2 division. Crossing line calculation lines of 3, in position of 3, in position of 3, right? Sets position of heart, line calculation of the mind, and set location of the soul, attractions, right? Sets of provision line cycles and 3 waving panels. Crosses line settings, high position laser lines, communication cross lines interference, travel calculation cross line screens, sets position to its operation surface, traversal of timelines, calculates the interference position of programs as application, intelligence, done by equation. Okay. All right, so we all understand how this all works inside position your settings, especially when you have to get into modifications of your moon. Your moon is surfacing in position of travel lines. The vast volume velocity sets location of acceleration. Marking line centers, marks line center line condition high center interference into 0, 12. Sets position location lines of 0 and position location of 24. Sets position locations and line condition of 0 and 48. Sets position location of 0 and position of 72. And sets travel communication of 0 into 144. And track location of flywheel direction time sequence and pattern calculation lines of stream location. Okay. So we have to work with the number sequence line screens. Directing lines of communication, panels, lines of 1 signature, 1 panel, 1 operation. Crossing line calculating lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, set location, right? Direct cross line stream line count, high centers, 1, 2, 3 set locations, right? So you add line communications, that's negative over positive, positive locations, 3 positive line centers, 3 track locations. 3 lines of communications over pi in track signal and high operation surface. Now, that direct line kind of high interference of 1, 1, 1, and 3 positive line calculating line interference, negative communication, setting track communication of balance, and sun communication, moon set location, line centers of travel calculation. Now, directing communications of panels sets lines of communication center calculation. Direct communication line interference, high position as program location setting to your pyramid of activation stream. Direct line calculation lines crosses line symbols, track to its communication system to all of our operation. Triangulation reset position of programs, 0 calculation lines that crop circles and high position. Now, directing communication lines of platforms crosses lines at 3 pass locations. See how it goes through the sun? Direct lines of the sun crosses line signals, 3 lines of measure, 4 lines of pi, 5 lines of calculation, and 6 location. Intelligence. See the eye lines? See the set position of its operation, their locations, and travel? Okay, you see it? There's the intelligence and set position of its operation. Mega multipass, it's all set up, okay? So really understand how the moon is set up in your attraction when it goes back in time. And what it's doing, it's reframing back in its original design, all through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Through intelligence, okay? All set position, location, high position of travel lines and high calculation line centers and all line communication of intelligence. Okay, very, very, very powerful set location of travel settings, all through direct system in calculation line settings in communications of travel recognition. Okay, so tell you. All right, so once the moon understands the track lines of point systems, it travels on its own. Calculation line inference. It travels on its own in its point system calculation. It's getting to know its anomalies and back and track interference in position of force recognition of time. So in that line center interference, it sets zero gravity, power direction time sequence, platitudes as line communications, and 3 lines of measures and scales and high position of travel and calculation. Done by equation. Ground lines, earth position, space line. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Phase direction of time sequence puts position line centers. Now, the calculation of the moon has to really understand how to surface its anomalies. So anomaly line interference is its polarities, box line triangulation of point system, travel calculation settings, 4 track locations, right? Now, 3 lines of communication anomalies, 3 line centers, 3 triangulation and resets, position of programs and face recognition. So we take the 4 lines of tracks and 2 track lines and 3 lines of 4 set position. Crosses line signals, center lines of communication setting, open line signals, and position of its operation. Very powerful stuff, guys. Now, when you get in line interference, it gets easier to understand the 3 lines, the 2 lines, and the 1 line rotation center of travel. Half-pipe communication, the moon comes in cross-line signals, and this is what it does in the 24 line centers and the 24 cyclone and position location of 7 line communication setting into all calculated line interference of 144 months of space and track location line centers back in communication setting to its operation service back in track location of center operation. Done by equation. Very complicated stuff of what your moon is doing when it goes back in time. Your provision cycles is truly understanding everything you need to understand is all provisions of calculation. Okay? It's incredible when you see these things through traction. Okay? Now, point system line calculation, X3000 comes in, right? Coming out of position of the sun. Okay? Now, direct communication, the sun modifies the line center's high position location of sonar and track location of 3 settings of point systems. Now, direct communication, the sun comes across lines, sets lines, high centers, high programs, high calculation, and program setting, positions, calculation. Okay? Done by equation. All right? To know exactly what is going on with you. Okay? Through the moon and the sun. On a 24 cycle and line setting and set position of operation through travel. Okay? Everybody's going to the same process, just different frequency, different vibration, different energy, different harmonics. But you're all going through the same process of all calculation. Mega multi-pass. Okay? How does everybody feel about that? All right. So getting everybody ready to understand the essential communication setting, all levels, high operation surface. Now, when you get into high calculation, high operation line center location, you come into 2 tangos, 2 line centers, high interference, teleportation, telewaving. Okay, 2 track lines, calculated line interference, and 2 travel location of 4 settings. Now, the 4 setting line interference sets position to its operation of point system travel. That calculates lines of holographic lines of 5, 6, 7, 8 channels of communication. Now, the 8 channels of communication comes into the center lines of position of travel, line rotation, surface, and all calculations of the programs. Okay? Direct line communication lines of frames. So you have to understand how the moon sets lines as division on a 24 cycle equals lines into 0 operation. Now, once it comes back into 0, it 0 lines its communications around its cycle. This is where it comes into its router phone in rotation center and position of travel. Okay? Now, once it goes around the line cycle, it comes into line connection of 024, outlines the calculation lines of 012 and set position and calculation. Once a calculation of 0 lines of 24 comes out of position locations, sets lines of 144. Once it comes out of that calculation line centers, base ground line centers, with the team line interference is 1044 and position location 1,000,044. Sets track calculated line centers to high position location line setting. Travel calculated line interference. After tomorrow line signal and high position locations, you'll be at 3 million line cycles and high calculation line centers at 0 calculation. Done by equation. Okay, this is the clocking of the moon, of what it does by itself. So it's very, 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 very complicated at what it's doing on a 24 cycle, a set location. Okay? It's all platforms and communication line settings, guys. You understand your location near 12 and set location of foundation, and understand your 24 8 clockings. But position locations is getting everybody into 012, into 024, into 048, into 072, and to in 0144 and track location of clocking. So now you understand the process, how this all works. Okay? Done by equation. It's exciting, isn't it? So that's what everybody's come into, right? Center calculation line centers a point system of 0 operation of 3 lines of 4 set location. Okay? 4 provision cycles, travel calculation lines. So what it's about is about the moon is coming back in its co-creating of its creation line calculation setting, what it's adapt to its future adaptation system, its location of its center calculation lines of its existence. Its set position location line centers comes into the center calculations in back in time, line interference back in the conscious location setting, back into 0. Once it goes back into 0, the sun and the moon come together, line communication, and creates the 4 line centers of triangulation of reset position programs and a dimensional sale of all operation. Woohoo! Right? Done by equation. Then you're saying the calculations of the moon and the earth, Mother Earth, Father Space. That's it. We're done. That's it. We're done. Okay? So the mechanism of high position line centers is the fly direction of time sequence. Your flywheel, right? Sets position torical fields and set location. Ooh. Oracle line division line calculation. Set in program set position of its operations location. Sit in high calculation. The phase direction of time sequence opposition of its operation. Okay? Yeah, you're extremely welcome. But that's it. That's exactly what's happening in set location of travels, especially in position location. Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is. Okay? To realize what is happening to you is its program and its own setting where it does everything all by itself. Okay? Quiet the mind, calms the soul. Okay? So that is happening to all centric calculations, to your provisions, to understanding set location line settings of travel, especially in track communications, in all line connections through a set position. Whoa. Okay. That's it. See you in 5.